Welcome. Did you know that there's a certain level of minimum retirement income that everybody in Canada gets, even if you have nothing saved for retirement? Canada has some very solid social programs: Old Age Security, OAS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS, and the Canada Pension Plan, CPP. The combination of these three retirement pensions creates a base level of retirement income in Canada. Now, these three programs, when combined, provide a minimum level of retirement income provided you meet two criteria. This means that if you have nothing saved for retirement, nothing at all, nothing in your RRSPs, nothing in your TFSAs, you will still receive this minimum amount of retirement income in Canada, as long as you meet those two criteria. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how much that amount is. I'm going to show you for an individual and for a couple, but the reality is that most of you will receive something above this minimum. So I'm also, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you a realistic minimum retirement income in Canada that is something maybe closer to what many of you will receive. Now, my name is Owen. I'm an advice-only financial planner, a CFP, and I'm the founder of Advice Lite. And here specifically at Advice Lite, we talk about low and moderate income retirement planning in Canada, specifically individuals and households with under $500,000 of financial assets and under $10,000 a year in defined benefit pension income, so not including CPP or OAS. If this sounds like you, consider subscribing. The strategies that you need for retirement are completely different than the traditional retirement planning strategies you see online, so consider subscribing. We come out with a new video every Thursday. Now, to understand the absolute minimum that you will receive in retirement in Canada, we have to understand two benefit programs: the Old Age Security Benefit, OAS, and the Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS. These two programs are going to work together to provide that base level, that minimum level of retirement income, provided you meet those two criteria. So one criteria is you have to be over the age of 65. You can only get OAS and you can only get GIS if you're 65 and older. The second criteria, and all the numbers we're going to talk about in this video, all the amounts, assume that you have at least 40 years of residency in Canada between age 18 and 65. This gives you the maximum old age security amount. If you have less, then the numbers are quite different. So if that's your situation, reach out to us. We can definitely help you figure out how much you're going to receive. But all the numbers we're going to share in this video assume that you are over the age of 65 and that you have at least 40 years of residency in Canada. So the way old age security works, it's entirely based on residency. As long as you're age 65 and as long as you've had 40 years in Canada, you'll get the maximum old age security benefit. There are partial benefits that you can qualify for, but this changes the amount that you receive from OAS and GIS. When it comes to Guaranteed Income Supplement, GIS benefit, this is what we would call an income-tested government benefit. So the key thing to remember with GIS is that it's based on your income, your taxable income, and how much you receive. Every dollar of taxable income will reduce the amount that you receive from the Guaranteed Income Supplement. So to get the maximum GIS benefit, you have to have zero taxable income other than old age security. Old age security is excluded, it's ignored when they're calculating your GIS benefit. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill out this table here. I'm going to show you the absolute minimum retirement income that you could receive in Canada. And then I'm going to also show you what's the realistic minimum. So something that includes a little bit of Canada Pension Plan benefit. But we're going to start with the absolute minimum. The absolute minimum, if you have no TFSA, no RSP, no CPP, nothing except for old age security and Guaranteed Income Supplement. And actually, we're going to use the Old Age Security Benefit Estimator from the Government of Canada website, so you can go and do this yourself as well. You can plug in your numbers and see what it looks like for you. I would highlight, though, that the planning around this is quite complex. So even though the tool might suggest that you are eligible for a certain amount, it could actually be quite a bit higher if you did a little bit of planning. So make sure if you are eligible for GIS, you reach out to us to see if there's any additional opportunities. But let's go through and let's do this for an individual first. So we're going to assume they're age 65, so they're born in 1961. We're going to assume no taxable income whatsoever. So no income, no taxable income, and no self-employment or employment income. We're going to assume that they're living in Canada. You do have to be living in Canada to receive the Guaranteed Income Supplement, so that's an important criteria. And we're assuming, again, 40 years of residency. So we've assumed that they've lived in Canada since the age of 18 here. So let's estimate these benefits. So we have here the old age security benefit amount. So I'm going to copy this and we're going to throw it into our table here. And so that gives us how much they're getting from old age security. It's $9,000, a little bit over $9,000 a year at the moment. And so this is what you'll receive as an individual. Now, let's also grab this guaranteed income supplement amount. So this gives us how much they're going to get from the GIS benefit, assuming there was no taxable income whatsoever. Now we've got no CPP, so we'll leave that 0. Let's put that in for GIS. The maximum GIS for an individual at the moment when we recorded this video, $13,478. That gives us a minimum amount of retirement income for an individual in Canada, absolute minimum of $22,502. So if you're an individual, that's how much you would get at an absolute minimum if you had no CPP, no TFSA, no RSP, and nothing else. It's definitely a low amount, but at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've seen clients do, people that I've worked with who are getting GIS benefits. I'm going to share with you what they do to make these amounts work. There are definitely some strategies that you can borrow from what they're doing. Now let's do this for a couple. So let's go back here and edit these assumptions. Let's assume that we're married. We're not living apart, so let's assume no for that. For the first person, we've got age 65, and let's fill in 1961 here, so we're age 65 as well. And they're getting the old age security benefit, perfect. No taxable income again for either partner, so we're going to enter 0 there. This is the absolute minimum you would get in Canada. And we're assuming full OAS benefit, so 40 years in Canada. So let's look at the estimated benefit amounts. So we've got the same from old age security. So let's throw that into our calculator here. They're both going to get $752 a month from OAS. Combined, that's going to be $18,000 per year. So double the individual amount. Now let's get the amount for guaranteed income supplement. And this is per person. So we're going to enter that here on a per person basis. It's going to get doubled per month for a couple. And that means for a couple, for a household, the GIS benefit, the maximum at the moment is $16,226 per month. So combined, the total minimum for a couple is $34,273. Now at these levels, there's no tax. So these are all after-tax amounts. Even though old age security is a taxable benefit, you're not going to be paying any tax on such a small amount of taxable income. Now again, these amounts are quite low, and we'll highlight some strategies that you can use to make this work in a retirement plan. The other thing I want to highlight is that GIS is one of the benefits in Canada that does favor individuals. So on a per person basis, you're definitely getting more as an individual than a couple on a per person basis. So it's one of the only benefits that does adjust quite substantially for individuals versus couples. Now this is the absolute minimum amount. So the absolute minimum is $22,502 per year as an individual. It's $34,273 per year as a couple. But that's not really realistic because most people have some sort of CPP benefit, some sort of benefit. And so let's go through and let's do a realistic minimum. And we're going to use the average. We're going to use the average CPP benefit to figure out what's a realistic minimum here. So let's plug that in right now. Let's assume that from a CPP perspective, we're getting at least $877 a month. And then you can use the OAS benefit estimator. You can use that to figure that out for your specific situation, but this will get you a bit of a better idea of more of a realistic minimum. So already that's going to give us $10,524 per year per person. And so for a couple, that's $21,000 per year. And then what we need to do is we need to take that amount. We're going to update our benefit estimates here. So we're going to go back and we're going to do it for an individual. We've got age 61, 1961. But here we need to enter in how much they're receiving from the Canada Pension Plan. This is net income from a tax perspective. And so this is what we need to include in this field here. It's not the same net income that you're used to on your pay stub. This is the net income on line 23600 on your tax return. And there's some instructions here if you want to see exactly what you should include in this amount. None of this is when it was employment income, so we're going to leave that blank there. And then we've got the same answers here. And so in this case, we've got a very reduced GIS benefit, so definitely not anywhere close to the maximum. But let me show you what that then looks like. So let's throw this in for GIS. We've got the same amount for OAS. That doesn't save, so it's changed. So it's $752 per month. And so a more realistic minimum for an individual would be about $25,000 to $26,000 per year. Now, that's actually a little bit low because there's still additional benefits you're probably eligible for. So there might be provincial benefits. So in Alberta, for instance, there's an Alberta Seniors Benefit. There's also in Ontario Gains, the Guaranteed Annual Income System. There's also GST HST credit or the new grocery benefit. There's also some other Trillium benefits in Ontario. So you're probably going to get another $1,000 to $2,000 above this. But that gives us a good idea of roughly what's the minimum realistic income for an individual in Canada. Now let's go through and do this again, but for a couple. So let's go back through the OAS security benefit estimator here. So let's do this for married in common law. They're not living apart. We've got 1961 as the date of birth. We're going to do that again here for the partner. And they are receiving OAS, so we're assuming both partners are eligible for OAS benefits. We've got their income from CPP. We're going to assume the same for the partner. So they're both getting the same amount. And we've got the same answers here. And so now this gives us quite a reduced GIS benefit because, again, it's income tested. And so let's put that in here. And let's make sure we get the format right. And then let's add old age security as well. So for a couple in Canada, perhaps a more realistic minimum would be about $43,626. So for a couple in Canada, that's probably a more realistic minimum income if you're getting some CPP benefits as a couple, somewhere around $21,000 a year. And then for an individual, if you're getting around $10,000 a year, you're going to have about $25,000 to $26,000 as a minimum level of retirement income. These aren't high amounts, so it is difficult to make this work, but there are some strategies that you can use that I've seen other clients use, clients that I've worked with who are receiving GIS benefits. This is how I've seen them make this work. The first thing is that renting is quite difficult on these incomes. So often what we see is, especially for individuals, is we see those individuals in some sort of shared accommodation. So either it's a friend and they're sharing rental costs, or it's a partner, but there's some way that they have some sort of shared accommodation, shared cost for rent. Renting as an individual on these levels of retirement income ends up being quite difficult. So if you are in a position where you're renting pre-retirement and you're thinking about how to make this minimum amount of retirement income work for you, think about some sort of shared accommodation, a friend, family, etc. So that's one way we definitely see a lot of low and moderate income retirees make these amounts work for them in retirement. The second strategy, and it's less of a strategy but more of a fact, is that this is simply easier if you own your home. So a lot of low and moderate income retirees, if they own their home, will have an easier time with these lower minimum amounts of retirement income. If you can own your home outright as you approach retirement, as you approach age 65, you can make things work with just CPP, OAS, and GIS. So if that's all you have approaching retirement, there's no RSP, no TFSA, but at least you own your home with no mortgage, then you can make things work with just CPP, OAS, and GIS. The third thing I'll share is that this is even easier if you own your home and you are in some sort of shared accommodation, some sort of cost sharing agreement, again with a friend or family member. So I've seen retirees who own their home, who are living with a friend or a family member, and they're not really charging them rent, but there's some sort of cost sharing agreement. this ends up reducing the cost of maintaining the home by half. So half the property tax, half the utilities, half the maintenance, etc. It makes it much more manageable on these minimum levels of retirement income. So if you own a home and you're looking at these amounts and you're thinking that that might be difficult to achieve, then one thing to think about is some sort of shared living, shared accommodation with a friend or family where you can do some sort of cost sharing arrangement. And usually this ends up working out quite well if you're both in a similar position. So we've seen that work for retirees, and this definitely helps make that minimum level of retirement income much, much more manageable in retirement. Now, the fourth thing I'd share, the fourth strategy, is that very often low and moderate income retirees don't own a vehicle. They're typically using public transit, and they're typically not owning a vehicle. The cost of owning a vehicle, upgrading a vehicle, the insurance on a vehicle, the unexpected repairs and maintenance on a vehicle can be quite difficult if you're on this minimum level of retirement income in Canada. So I would say it's quite common, not everybody, but quite common for low and moderate income retirees to be using public transit versus owning a vehicle. It just makes it so much easier if you can get by without a vehicle and use public transit instead. Now, the fifth thing that I'll see quite common is this all becomes quite a bit easier if you're in a medium to large sized city. If you're in a smaller town or if you're living more rurally, one, it can be difficult to find accommodations that fit within your budget. Two, it can be quite difficult because often you have to own a vehicle. And so it can be difficult if you have no access to public transit. So living in a medium to large size city in Canada ends up being quite a bit easier for low and moderate income retirees, not only because of the public transit, not only because there's additional housing options, but often because there's additional programs as well. So with the guaranteed income supplement, often there's access to additional programs like dental care, medical care, etc. And that can be more easily accessed if you're in a medium to large size Canadian city. It's definitely possible to live in a smaller town or rurally on these levels of income, but it is a bit more difficult. Now, the sixth and final strategy that I'll share is that if you can, adding a little bit of part-time work up to $5,000 per year can help make ends meet. And the reason is there is no clawback on your guaranteed income supplement if you're earning $5,000 or less of self-employment income or employment income. So often, if you're in early retirement between age 65 and maybe 75, if you're earning $5,000 per year, that's entirely in your pocket. There's typically no tax at that income level. So you've got your basic exemption, covers all of the tax that you would owe, and there's no clawback on your guaranteed income supplement. So all of those minimum amounts that we shared previously, you can add $5,000 per person in employment income and not impact those amounts at all. It really does help make ends meet if you need to boost up your retirement income a bit above those minimum levels that we shared previously. Now, all of this assumes that you have no TFSA or RSP assets, but if you do, there are additional strategies that you can use to get the most out of your CPP, OAS, and GIS. So even if you've got $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 per person in your TFSA or RSP, there are additional things that you can do to navigate all of the tax rules and benefit rules in retirement. And that's important for CPP and OAS, but especially for the guaranteed income supplement because of the clawbacks that are triggered by any sort of taxable income. So if you need help with that, feel free to reach out to me and the team, and we will definitely help you create a retirement plan that's crafted around low-income retirement benefits. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you come back next Thursday for our next video that's focused on low and moderate income retirement planning in Canada.